I know that tomorrow morning you'll be reading from the story of the heathen prophet Bilam, who is sent to curse the Israelites, but ends up delivering 4 visionary oracles. The third and most famous oracle, your parasha tomorrow, compares the people in elevated poetic language to palm groves, gardens, aloes, and cedars besides the water. Bilam's 4th and final oracle is a poem, I think, of riddles, prophesying a future of great triumph for Israel before Bilam makes his way home. And there perhaps this week's Sedra might have ended, except it does not. There are a further 8 verses which seem to turn Bilam's unqualified praise of the Israelites right on its head. These people, blessed by Bilam, are portrayed in these last 8 verses as abhorrent in their behavior. The ringleaders are publicly impaled, and Aaron's grandson, Pinhas, decides to take the law into his hand. The Israelites have remained in Moab, and while staying there, the menfolk, as the Torah puts it, profane themselves by having affairs with the Moabite women. Perhaps the men are bored, perhaps they dislike being fenced in by the laws that have now been imposed upon them from Sinai. Perhaps they got a bit excited when they came across this charismatic heathen prophet, Bilam. Perhaps they were impressed by his freedom, his arrogance, the way in which he addresses and has a go at his king, Balak. The Torah doesn't give us, of course, any reasons for their behavior, although the Midrash more than suggests that Bilam hasn't only encouraged this outrageous behavior, but has actually counseled King Balak to send the Moabite women to seduce the Israelites. And it isn't only the Israelites' flirtation with the foreign women that threatens the stability of the community, but the fact that they're seduced into sacrificing and worshipping the Moabite god. It is this attachment to Baal Peor, as he's called, the people's apostasy, that causes God's anger. Vayichar af Adonai b'Yisrael, literally, God's nose burns. This is the Hebrew expression for being angry, or nose burns. And God orders Moses to take the ringleaders and have them publicly hanged. Only then will God's anger be turned away from Israel. But at that very moment, an Israelite man brings a Midianite woman into the camp. The Torah at this point seems to conflate the Moabites and the Midianites. We're not quite sure who is being referred to here. The man doesn't appear to conceal the fact that he's brought his foreign girlfriend into the camp. In fact, he goes up and introduces her to his family right in front of Moses and the rest of the Israelite community. And this is right after the menfolk have been hung for their idolatry and flirtations with the Moabite women. And then something extraordinary and really quite shocking happens. Aaron's grandson, Pinhas, picks up a spear, follows the man and his partner into their tent, and stabs them both through the belly. A plague which has already killed 24,000 people is then stopped. And we must assume it's stopped as a result of Pinhas's violent action. Now, Pinhas gives his name to next week's Torah portion. I think that's yours, Rosa, isn't it? But you're doing a nicer bit, right? where Pinhas is rewarded by God for his vigilante behavior by being given a covenant of peace, permanent priestly leadership. Good boy, says God. That may or may not have satisfied listeners or readers of this story in the past, but I have to say it leaves a very bitter taste for contemporary readers and indeed some of the ancient rabbis. These brief 8 verses that tell this sorry tale are certainly expansive and contemporary in the subjects raised: interracial relationships, freedom of religion, extramarital sex, taking the law into one's own hands without reverting to any authoritative agency. I think these are all subjects that we recognize perhaps even in our own contemporary times. And I asked myself, why didn't Pinhas think of going to his uncle, Moses, who after all had nearly 40 years of experience leading the Israelites? Yes, you could imagine, you could argue, it was an emergency. There was a pandemic that had killed 24,000. It needed to be stopped. Pinhas was the vaccination that brought it to an end. But I am not convinced by this. The Talmud focuses on the behavior of the young man, Zimri, who brings his girlfriend into the camp and is going to challenge Moses in an outrageous way. What Zimri does is kind of an extraordinary passage in the Talmud. He seizes the Midianite woman, his partner, whose name is Cosby, by her hair, bivlorit, says the Talmud, which means her plait. He kind of drags her by her hair, and he drags her before Moses, and Zimri says to Moses, "Son of Amram," Amram was Moses' father, "is this woman forbidden or permitted? If you say that she's forbidden, well, what about you? Didn't you marry," he says to Moses, "the daughter of Yitro, who himself was a Midianite? Your wife was a Midianite." In other words, Zimri accuses Moses of ignoring the halakha himself by taking a foreign wife. It was this incident, says the Talmud, that led Pinhas to take action. He turns to his uncle Moses and says to him, "Brother of the father of my father, did you not teach me, as you came down from Mount Sinai, that one who engages with a Gentile woman, zealots strike him?" How did Moses respond to Pinhas? The Talmud gives him a line that is very similar, curiously, I only just thought about this afternoon, very similar to a verse in the New Testament, in the book of John, Gospel of John, that goes, "Let him who is without sin cast the first stone." And what Moses says in the Midrash is a little different in Aramaic, "Karina di igarta ihu lehoi pavanka." Let the one who reads the letter be the agent to fulfill its contents. In other words, Moses gives him permission to cast the first stone, or in this case, to pick up his spear and stab the offenders. Was Pinhas courageous, justified, heroic in killing the 2 lovers? Or did he go too far? Was he too zealous in appointing himself as a vigilante to guard Israel's morality? It's left to the Talmud to recognize that Pinhas's attitude towards intermarriage conflicts with other biblical marriages, notably Moses' marriage to Tzipporah herself a Midianite, a priest's daughter, who rescues Moses from death at the beginning of Exodus. The book of Ruth, of course, is another example of a Moabite woman who marries an Israelite and becomes the progenitor of King David. And we can think of lots of other examples of King David and King Solomon, who take foreign wives. So we don't have to approve of Pinhas and his zealotry, even if God does in Rosa's Torah portion next week. And it shouldn't form the attitudes towards the partnerships we or others make, or indeed the freedom for people to be whom they want to be. I hope that liberal Judaism promotes a more tolerant, open-minded, and inclusive expression of Judaism, ensuring that there is a place for everyone to be part of our community